I'd like to introduce Patrick, who's going to talk about closing the technology gap. Thank you.
Thank you. That's just one of the challenges we have today. The first challenge I had was they said, you're an Irishman, here's a microphone, there's a stage. Say everything you have to say within 15 minutes or less. That's probably the bigger challenge that we'll have here today. So I will endeavour to do that. However, the focus and the bigger challenge for me is to talk about this, which is closing the technology gap. Identifying based on student voice and research that we've done through institutions across the UK, what is the perception of technology from a student's perspective, and what is the perception of staff? How effective do we think we are in technology? So we'll be looking at a little bit of evidence, we'll be looking at a little bit of statistics, and then we'll be providing some very practical advice moving forward as to how perhaps we can start to close that gap. For me, my little Bitmoji here, I'm Patrick. I have an odd job title. I am the ed tech guy that actually says that on my business card. My job in Text Help is to evangelize and champion education technology, not just the stuff we do as a company, but how we can use education technology and technology in general to impact teaching and learning across the UK and indeed across the world. If you need to reach me, I'm just on the bottom of that slide. From a Text Help perspective, and we'll not be mentioning our products throughout this, but the products that we do principally started from an accessibility perspective. So we do plugins such as Read and Write and Equatio to try and help build accessibility around maths and literacy, so providing access on any technology platform. What I thought we'd start with just in this lightning session is having a look at the research that we've put in over the last couple of years. And I like to call it the adoption conundrum, okay? Because when we start to look at how technology works effectively in our schools and institutions, we need to weigh up what do our pupils and students perceive the effectiveness of technology and what do our staff say. And we found some interesting things in our statistics that we pulled out. So this study was taken over basically 2 years. Along the bottom, we just split it up into academic terms. It was focused on 16 to 24. It was schools, colleges, and university. And we looked at it from a perspective of those institutions, where were they in technology? And we only selected those institutions that were at a definite point of implementing a new range of technology. Perhaps they were moving to the cloud, perhaps they were going one-to-one, perhaps they had a new BYOD or VLE. So we started to ask the lecturers and the teachers, we started to ask the students, how do you rate effective technology in your institution? And we found some very interesting things. We found that our very excited staff peaked very, very early. So within 6 months of a new technology implementation, they were doing some really, really good things. But what you'll notice on the graph is that over the course of the 2 years, that their perceived effectiveness of technology fell away very, very, very fast. Now, we can look at that in a number of different ways. Maybe it was they were overexcited about the technology. We all jumped into AR, we jumped into AI, and we started doing some really whiz-bang things very soon. And we started to wane in terms of interest. We don't know what that was down to, but it's interesting to see that those who we thought were going to do well with technology from a teaching and learning standpoint drifted away fairly fast. The interesting thing for me was in these nervous members of staff. These members of staff that said, oh, technology isn't for me, I'm afraid of technology. Technology has not the place in teaching and learning you're telling me it should have. And actually those at the end of 2 years started to rate themselves as a lot more effective within the classroom and lecture theatre. So we started to see that when we started to sustain CPD across those years, when we started to sustain support, when we started to embed it further, that those were the body of staff that actually achieved more, at least from a student perception and their own perception. Interestingly though, if you take the blue line is how pupils and students perceive technology from a learning standpoint. So they started off saying, in my institution, technology isn't used very well. It doesn't do a lot for me in terms of learning. But by the end, or by the middle of the first year, the end of the first year, that had started to peak. And that's in line with how we see staff progression as well. But now we start to see this interesting slope and slide from our pupils and students. So by the end of the 2 years, actually they weren't far off where they started in terms of how they rated it. 2 years is a very, very, very long time in technology. So that's just a quick snapshot view. So very clearly we have a gap here between the perception of staff and the perception of student. Maybe it's down to expectations, the expectations of students on how they use technology outside of their institution and their learning environment. Maybe it is simply down to their perception of their understanding of their staff and their mentors and exactly how they use technology. We just don't know, but we've got some more stats here that we can start to look at when my green button starts to work. Yep, there we go. So these are statistics, National Office of Statistics. They'll not come as a surprise to anybody, but I think it's worth putting it in perspective. In our 16 to 24 group, our age group, 92% of students are using mobile phone technology. That's the penetration on the market, and it starts to slide up in 25 to 34. These are the devices. But what I think is actually more interesting is if we take, and we're away on the clicker again there. There we go. If we take the same set of statistics and we look at what is their primary way that they access the internet, again, it's not a surprise, but it's worth seeing it visually. If we look over the last 2 years, 17 and 18, we'll see that we're at 97% generally of where our students start to access information and start to access the internet on their mobile device. So it's becoming more and more mobile, and I think we can all identify with that as we go forward. Oh, there we go. So we know that technology is starting to impact all of the ways of student life, inside our institutions, outside, in every area. We also know and take it for granted now that learning is being impacted and treated in a different way. Just think about YouTube for a second. If we take, whoa, I've got to wave this very high to get this clicker to work. If we take, have you got another one? Thank you. If we take some very standardized tools that we all use on a daily basis, let's think about those from a technology perspective. Amazon, for me, is very invasive. Alexa is very invasive. It listens to what I buy and what I say. It recommends to me. But for me, it's a better technology experience because it personalizes what I want and what I need. If we take things like Netflix, again, it's personalizing my experience and delivering new experiences to me as I move. YouTube, of course, as well. Content is created by very, very, very many people on this. And even my little pup Charlie, that's my pup Charlie, my beagle back at home, he actually has a personalized app that delivers on a monthly basis personal food for him. He has a personal experience through technology. How bizarre is that? The interesting thing for me there is, though, across these things, we're starting to come to grips with terms that we all hear about. Big data, we're talking about open data, we're talking about shared data and shared experiences. Amazon is not just basing its results on its recommendations on just what I buy, it's basing it on the big data sets that are out there. YouTube and learning is driven by the needs of the community and what the community responds to and how the community shares. So that's just technology that we deal with every day. So let's go back to the numbers. And this really, really, really surprised me. Again, this is 16 to 24. So 16 to 24, we asked over 50 institutions, students in there, what technology last year, 2018 exam period, what did you use for study? Okay, the top 4 things that they used for study. These were the top 4 things that came out of the actual responses, which absolutely, I think, shocked us to the core. Because these are not education technology, by and large. These are pieces of technology that are there in the palm of hands that we're using every day. FaceTime and Skype and Hangouts, video conferencing was the #1 most used technology tool for study. Secondly, Snapchat. Who on earth would have thought that Snapchat was an effectively used tool for study? Bizarre. YouTube, of course, is a pretty obvious one in terms of its access to open and shared content. And then Google Classroom, general VLE. So Google Classroom, we saw a big rise at the end of last year, but VLEs in general. So we know that the ed tech bit is still used, but what shocked us about this is actually this feeds into collaboration. This is how our students are starting to study more. They're using the collaborative tools that are there, that are not branded as education technology, and they're working smarter and harder together. So they're taking advantage of community. They're taking advantage of their peers. They're taking advantage of a whole set of data. So next question was, what technology helps you the most, okay? So in study, in your learning, what technology helps you the most? 92% of students said It's just digital resources. The more quality digital resources I get, the better I can manipulate and use those to assist my learning. And you might just see across the bottom, we give them a multiple choice in this. Digital resources, your VLE, more in-room use, or access to more devices on campus. Was it about access to technology, or was it about access to content? And it started to become about this. Why? Think of the mobile phone ownership. Think about the fact that we have these devices there. So access to digital resources was key. What one thing do you want when it comes to technology? So in terms of technology and learning, as a student, what do you want? What it matters most to you? Again, another very surprising result. 84% of students said, I just want choice. Bottom line is, I want to be able to be flexible with the way I learn, with the tools I use, with how I use them. I want it to be personalized for me. I want to have access to a wider set of resources. I want choice. And second to that, of course, is I want voice in how I learn and what I use. And the questions we ask, do you want better resources? Do you want a choice of technology, as we said? Do you want staff to be more knowledgeable? Or do you want better technology on campus that you can access to? No, I just want to have choice in terms of what it is I use. So this one may not surprise you. Out of 10, how would you rate your lecturer or teacher's understanding of technology when it comes to learning? Anybody want to call out a number out of 10? Well, okay, somebody said 3 and they weren't far wrong. The average was 3.2. They don't get technology. Now, that's very, very unfair. You all work with students all day, every day. You know they have a very skewed view of our understanding as the older generation in the room just because we happen to have a few years on them. Interestingly, but maybe not surprisingly, they rated themselves at 8.9. We are fabulous at technology. The challenge, of course, is that they may be really good with technology, but they don't necessarily get the context of how that applies within their learning environment. So how do we start to address this? We start to wrap up. Universal design for learning. This is a whole session in itself, but it's worth mentioning at this stage. This is very heavily used in the US and by some of our universities here now in the UK. These are the guidelines from CAS.org, and they look at it in a very simplistic way. They say, right, we need to look at the why of learning, the what of learning, and the how of learning. How does the brain function and how does it learn? From my perspective as an ed tech guy, I want to see, well, how does that apply from a technology standpoint? How can we use technology? Because redesign of curriculum and varying that for students is not just about technology. So I've got 2 minutes left. I've got another 14 slides. The Irishman is going to achieve this, no doubt. So we've got 3 different ways that we can start to present technology. We need to provide multiple ways to engage with our students, build on prior knowledge. We need to look at how we motivate them, how we reward them, how we set goals and targets. We can do that through technology. We need to look at multiple ways of representation. Can we supply those wonderful resources on a range of different formats that can reach every level and type of learner in the way that they want to be reached? And can we provide technology that gives them multiple ways to express their learning, to articulate it? And that, of course, opens up a wide, wide range of challenges. I'm going to do this in 60 seconds or less. So I'll give you a few pieces of advice as we wrap up the deck. Number 1, think about technology to be less about accommodation, which is how we have viewed it, and far more about inclusion of everybody. We used to look at inclusion as dots of all of the same color on the screen and just a few students we have to accommodate. That is not the way our pupils and students are learning. They need a range of technology and need to be included on multiple levels. Reconsider, are we really interested in educational technology? Or are we just interested in technology? Mobile devices, things like G Suite, starting to integrate from our lives into our classroom and into the world of work. Maybe we need to redefine this. Think about the OECD report, the 2030, the vision for future for 26 countries in OECD, looking at, well, what's the main thing we need to focus on for this Education 4.0 for 2030? And they've said it's student agency. Student agency actually is key. Ownership by students of their goals, their self-efficacy, building on their prior knowledge, looking at how we motivate them, taking ownership and providing them with choice and voice. And for us, we've got to start building our bridge, our little Meccano bridge. It's for technology to be effective, we have to start integrating small pieces at a time. Small is the new big. We cannot revolutionize teaching and learning with large steps in technology. We need to be using some small steps. So last few slides, we need to be doing this and think about universal design for learning. How could we redesign curriculum? We can redesign curriculum by providing multiple ways that pupils and students can access, multiple ways that students can have voice and can start to grow. We need to be thinking about the cloud. And last but not least, we need to be looking at these 6 things. So for me, this is how we sum up all the things we've learned in this study. It's about access. Accessibility for all in terms of the tools that we present. Comprehensive range of technology. We need to be looking wider at the technology that we integrate. Different approaches to CPD and professional development. Listen to our pupils, listen to our students, and see how we can grow together using open data, sharing between our institutions, and doing more together. Empowerment for both our staff and our students. We need to be very strategic. Think about cloud integration, think about curriculum redesign, and if we redesign curriculum, how the heck are we going to have to look at assessment within that as well? These are things we have to take into consideration to close the gap. And last but not least is absolutely back to student agency, giving students ownership of the technology they use, giving them the choice, giving them the voice, and giving them access to the widest range of opportunities to build all of those soft skills and those harder skills that we've heard about through the conference here today. So that's me. I think we just about made it in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. That was definitely a lightning talk. I'm Patrick, and by all means, talk to me after today. Thank you, guys.